Okay, let's begin 17b3, Yud Zayin Amud Bet. So we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows. Tanu Rabbanan. Yep. Kol elu she'amiru mutarin legalech b'moed. Anytime. Hello? Sorry. Kol elu she'amiru mutarin legalech b'moed. Anyone that we said that it's a mutar to shave during the holiday, mutarin legalech b'yemei evlan. The Gemara is making like an equivalence between the what's it called, anytime that you're allowed to cut on Chol HaMoed to cut also during the time that a person's avel. The Gemara says, "V'atanya asurin." What do you mean? Don't we know that avel is asur to cut his hair during the time of mourning? And yet we talked about an avel and we said that avel is allowed to cut his hair on Chol HaMoed. The Gemara answers, "Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav Shela, Ki Tanya Hacha Mutarin." When do we say that we talked about that these people should be able to cut their hair during in the time of Avelut? Ke b'shetechafu avelav. In a case where a person had a scenario where the Avelut happened one after the next. We need a mute. Okay. Where the person had the person had Avelut, mourning, one after the next. So he was in the middle of mourning for one Avelut, and right afterwards he had another one. So since that's such a long time, and it went straight into the second period of mourning, they allowed him to do it and to cut his hair during the second period, the second time of Avelut. So that was what we meant when we said that a person who's at Avel is able to cut their hair just like he's able to cut it during Chol HaMoed. The Gemara says, if the case that you're telling me about is where it was one after the next, my irya kol elu shamiru. What are you trying to say or trying to add when you say kol elu shamiru, all these that they said, right? Afilu kule almanami, right? When a person had one mourning after the next, so the halacha is that anyone in that scenario is allowed to cut their hair, not only somebody who didn't cut before. Titania tachafu avelav ze'achazeh. If a person had one mourning after the next, hichbid sa'aro. If the hair was too much, hair was too heavy, mekel betar. He's able to lessen it.
Was it 7-7?
Betar.
7 and 7 time?
I would imagine it's 7 for a non-parent and 30 for yeah.
So that's saying he was at day 28 and then God forbid they had another loss.
Correct. So it's a long stretch. Okay. Hichbid sa'arot mekel betar umechabes kisuto b'mayim, and the Braita ends that he's able to wash his clothing in water also in a scenario where he has multiple back-to-backs. So it seems like you're communicating that people that are cutting on Chol HaMoed are the same as people who had mourning. You now told me that the case of mourning is a case where the mourning is back-to-back. But that would indicate that only the kind of person who's allowed to cut his hair on Chol HaMoed is allowed to cut his hair when he has back-to-back mourning sessions. Who is allowed to cut their hair on Chol HaMoed? Only someone who couldn't cut it before. When it comes to the mourning, we don't make that condition. So what are we adding when we say Kol Elu? It's not true. What you're telling me is now not true. Gemara says, Ha'itmar ala. Amar Rav Chizda said, Betar v'lo b'misparayim. What the Braita means is that he's only able to cut Betar with a razor, but not when he's using misparayim. Right? Why? It's not the normal way to cut your hair. B'ma'im v'lo b'neter v'lo ba'al. A person's allowed to wash his clothing in water, but he's not able to use it in the type of detergent or whatever that he would normally clean it with.
It's like the Shinui way in the beginning when we learned.
Very similar, yes. So the Gemara is saying, when did I say Kol Elu She'amiru? So when the first Braita taught you the case, when the person had mourning after mourning, and there the halacha is that it's mutar. But if the person also was not able to do it before, he also had the extra element of not cutting his hair before, then he would even be allowed to cut his hair with his scissors, which is not a shinui. And he's even allowed to wash his clothing in regular water that has detergent, which is the normal way. So what we're talking about over here is therefore different gradients of heter. Now, just to be clear, the first thing that should have given you this clue that the Braita was telling you something a little bit odd is the fact that if you take a look, the language that it uses is very strange. If a guy had avelut zeh achar zeh, one after the next, hichbid se'aro, and his hair became so heavy, then he could lighten it with a razor. Who talks like that? You know, imagine a guy walks into the barber, he says, what are you looking for? I'm looking to lighten the load, right? Nobody says that. You say, I have a trim, I'm looking for a haircut, right? The Braita is therefore expressing that we're giving you like the minimal we're able to allow you, which is to lighten the load of hair that's too heavy because of extended mourning periods back to back. The Gemara continues, yeah?
Get back, yes.
I didn't hear anything you just said. It went blank.
Back to back, if how would you have back to back if it goes into the Chag, then the Chag would hold the morning until after the Chag, right?
No. No. 1 second. We're not talking about a scenario where it went from 1 to 1 into the Chag. We're saying that the things that we said, kol elu she'ameru, the ones that we said that are mutar in the holiday are mutar in avelut. The Gemara said, where is that case? And the Gemara answered, the case would be in a case of this. That's where we said, kol elu she'ameru, these that we said that were mutar on the holiday are also mutar in zeh achar zeh. So the Gemara is comparing a case where it was mutar. In other words, the avel is the case. Where in avelut are you telling me this law? You're telling me this law in this specific case of avelut. Okay?
Example of back to back, like where you could take a haircut.
So what we're comparing is avelut into chol hamoed, which we know that's when it ends on chol hamoed, right? We're comparing that to a case in avelut, which is also allowed, which is what? Where it was zeh achar zeh. So in a zeh achar zeh, we allowed you to cut in the middle of the second morning, like we allowed you to cut in a regular avel in the middle of chol hamoed. We're not comparing the case of zeh achar zeh into the holiday.
You could actually cut your hair with a razor during a back-to-back avelut, the second avelut, during the avelut, in the 7-day period, actually lighten the load during that period?
Correct. Right? Now, what Jonah pointed out was that it's less likely that we're talking about the 7-day period. That's not a lot of time. We're talking about back-to-back 30 days, right, of not cutting the hair. So that's already an excessive amount of time. Also, I don't think that you would use the word, the hair is heavy after 7 days. And even if you added another, midway through the second set of 7 days is 10 days. What's it, like 10 more days of hair is not heavy. We wouldn't use that language. So it makes sense we're talking about 30 and 30. Okay? Says the Gemara.
Right at the beginning, you wouldn't be allowed?
Sorry?
It wouldn't matter when. After the first 30,
Yeah.
if he had another avelut, he would be able to, right after it started, if he felt it was heavy, he could get a haircut.
Correct.
Right at the beginning.
Correct, yes. And then the Gemara is making a differentiation and saying that how you comparing these two things, by chol hamoed, it's only relevant if you were unable to cut before. But if you were able to cut before, then you should have cut before. That's not the case over here. So why are you comparing them? And the Gemara answers, the answer is that is the case, and we're only going to allow you to do a smaller level of cutting, i.e. with the razor instead of the scissors, and with the clothing, with regular water instead of detergent, if the person had an opportunity to do so before and didn't use it. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chizda says, Zot omeret avel asur b'tichboset. What it comes out is, we see from here that that if it's telling you that you're allowed in a second set of mourning, that tells you that you're not allowed in a single set of mourning. Okay. Says the Gemara, I don't know why he thought that you needed that, because we already saw it earlier specifically, right? So the only thing that I would answer is that what the Hadush over here is that we said that he's allowed to, in this case, Zeh Achazeh, wash it in water. What would that tell you in a regular case? That you're not even allowed to wash it with water. So that we didn't have a proof for from Kvisa, because Kvisa is not normally only in water. So I might have thought that Avelut, you're not allowed to wash it properly like in the washing machine, but to rinse it with water would be mutar. And now we're learning over here that even with water is asur during the Avelut. Now, says the Gemara, okay, what about cutting nails? Tanu Rabbanan, Kishem she'ameru asur l'galech moed, just like we said a person's not allowed to cut their hair on the moed, kach asur litot tziponayim moed, you're also not allowed to cut your nails on chol ha-moed. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yossi on the other hand, matir. Rabbi Yossi holds that cutting the fingernails is mutar. That we never said was asur on chol ha-moed.
Same as we do today, or was it any different nails? This
Sorry?
same way like we cut nails today?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think there was
special.
I don't think there's any differentiations. Okay. So says the Gemara.
Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yossi matir. Rabbi Yossi is matir. Rabbi Yossi allows. It says the Gemara, this same machloket that you had with regards to the moed, you also have with regards to avelut. Kshem shameru. Avel asur legalech b'me'evlo. Just like you say that avel is not allowed to shave during his avelut. Kach asur litol tziponayim b'me'evlo. He's also not allowed to cut his fingernails during the time of mourning. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi matir, and Rabbi Yossi allows it. So you see that whatever they held with regards to the fingernails on Chol HaMoed was the same as what they held with regard to the fingernails during the time of Avelut. The Gemara continues. Amar Ula said, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda be'evel. Okay, so you asked what's nowadays. The case, I know you were asking about, does it mean that in a case, were they cutting in the same way?
Right.
But what the halacha is, Amar Ula, the one day the Gemara tells us how we actually hold, Joey, you're not here. The one time. Amar Ula says, how do we hold? Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda be'evel, when it comes to Avelut, which means, in Avelut, we say, you're not allowed to cut your nails. But halacha ki Rabbi Yossi b'moed, and halacha is like Rabbi Yossi with regards to chol ha-moed, that on chol ha-moed you're allowed to cut your nails. So just in case you thought that was easy enough, very smooth and easy, says the Gemara, Shmuel Omer. Shmuel says, no. Halacha ki Rabbi Yossi b'moed. Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi on the holiday. U'ba'evel, and on Avelut as well. In both cases, the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. You're always allowed to cut your nails. The Amma Shmuel, because Shmuel says, halacha kedivre ha-mekil be'evel. Because we already saw this before, that Shmuel held that when it comes to Avelut, whenever there's a machloket, he always goes lenient. And that's why, Joey, you support his yeshiva. Says the Gemara, Pinchas achu ademar Shmuel.
So, fingernails, we're saying that it's a halacha.
So Shmuel held that we mekil on both of them. So in other words, not only do we hold like Rabbi Yossi with regards to the moed, okay, with regards to chol moed, we also hold like Rabbi Yossi with regards to the avelut, okay. Why? Because any machloket, he says, always defaults to the more lenient opinion, okay. Says the Gemara. Pinchas, avu achua dema Shmuel, Pinchas, the brother of Shmuel, itra be milta. Unfortunately, he had a very difficult time. What does that mean? Somebody passed away. It's a euphemism without saying that something bad happened. They were very strict about saying negative things that happened to somebody, so they would use all sorts of language to use instead of saying that. Where do we find it? We already had it a few times, where it says that a bad thing happened. Huh? In Inu Tahor, excellent. In Pashat Noach. We also had it in the Gemara, where the Gemara says, where the bad thing happened to the enemies of the Jews. but
Ta'anit, we said a lot.
we had in Ta'anit many times. What happens when this happens to the enemy of the Jews? And really what they mean is that the negative thing is happening to the Jewish people, but you don't want to say that. It's like ayin hara. Says the Gemara, Al Shemuel, so somebody, one of his relatives passed away. Al Shemuel, mishal ta'ama mineh. So Shemuel went to try and get him a little bit of comfort. Hazinu letufre dahavinifishin, and he saw that the nails of his brother were very long. Amale amaylo shakatlu. How come you didn't cut them? Amale said, Ibidide havi hava mi mizalzelet bekulehai. If this happened to you, in other words, if you were in this situation, that's what you would have said? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going on with the nails? Right? Havai kishgagashi atzam lifnei hashalit. This expression that Pinchas said was like a mistake that came out of the mouth of the king. Okay? And Shmuel, unfortunately, suffered a loss as well, one of his relatives.
Is this how
because he said to him, like, if it happened to you, right? That's why you should never, ever.
The words of the rabbis are so strong. He said even
Yes.
when they put the dog.
Even when they did the klalan, the tail of the dog. Yes,
dog.
the shamt on the dog's tail.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So, unfortunately, this is what happened. Al Pinchas achua. Pinchas, his brother, now went to console him. Parmenan. Limishal ta'ama mineh. Shaklinu litufre. Chavtinu la'apeh. Shmuel took his nails and he threw them in his face. Amaleh, he said, Let lach brit kiruta desvatayim. Don't you know? Don't you understand? Don't you agree with what the Chachamim said? That brit kiruta desvatayim means that there's a covenant between Hashem and the lips. That when lips say something, that thing occurs and it takes place. So look at what you said and look at where I am now. Imagine hearing that as Pinchas, that Shmuel blamed him for what took place. Rabbi Yochanan says, where do we know that when a person says something with their lips, in Shamayim Hashem made a covenant with the lips, with people's mouths, that what they say should have a tremendous impact. It says, Vayomer Avraham el Ne'arav. Avraham said to the young men, who we know who it was, Shavu lachem po machamo, sit here with the donkey, ve'ani ve'anar necha al kol ve'neshnachem ve'neshu elechem. And me and the boy will go till there, and we'll bow and we'll return to you. Who did he say? Who was the Ne'arav? He said it to Ishmael and Eliezer. We're going to go there and we're going to come back. V'istaya milta dehadu tarvayu. And what happened? In Shamayim, God made sure that the words that he said actually came true. Fascinating. Because as far as Avraham knew, where was he going with Yitzchak? To Akedah. Why did he say, we will come back and v'nashuv alechem?
Come back with the donkey.
Sorry?
Come back with the donkey.
No, he said, sit with the donkey.
Oh, okay.
Me and the boy, Ya'ani Yitzchak, we're going to go over there and bow to Hashem, and then we are going to come back.
Right.
But what's the we if he's only going to come back himself? Says the Gemara, Istaya milta dahadu tavayu. Now this Gemara is fascinating. Can someone tell me why?
Because the same, it's just proving whatever comes out of the lips it's solid in Shamayim. Abraham says, I'm coming back, so Hashem, the Akedah didn't happen.
So again, what's the question?
They can't overrule.
What was the question? Because I'm not sure what he means.
Question from Shemuel and Pinchas. Look, don't you know that if you say something out of your mouth, it's going to come true in Shamayim? And then this is the proof.
Well, we know we're trying to bring this as a proof. I'm asking, what's the question on the proof? I think that this proof is a very strange proof.
Why? It says he came out of his mouth and he did it.
He wasn't coming back with him.
Huh?
He wasn't coming back with him.
So that means it's a good proof. Why do I think it's a bad proof? What's my question on this?
Abraham wasn't lying.
Okay, I didn't say it doesn't say that you have to lie in order for this to be true. You know what the question is? The reason why you came back with Yitzchak is because Avram said, I'm coming back with the other guy. The Akedah was a test. He was never supposed to bring Yitzchak as a korban. He was always supposed to come back with Yitzchak. What's the proof that the words make these things happen?
But how are we supposed to know he was always supposed to come back with Yitzchak?
So we're not supposed to know that. But we have the Torah. So Avram could not have known.
Right.
But we know that the parasha begins, V'ha'elohim nisa et Avraham. And God was testing Avraham. There was never any
So
intention.
that's the proof Abraham did not know.
So
Did not know
he for sure did not know.
Coming back with you.
100% he did not know. So in his mind, maybe his words turned it around. But we got the story, we've got the notes. We know that scene was never supposed to take place. And it wasn't because he said we will return, that's why Yitzchak came back with him.
Right.
Yitzchak came back with him because the plan was never for Yitzchak to die. So what's the proof from here? Tosafot shockingly asks a different question. Let's take a look at Tosafot. First Tosafot, top of the page. Vistaya milta dehadur. Tema, says the Gemara. This is difficult to understand. Dilma mida tova meruba. Maybe the reason why his words came true over here was because he said a good thing. And we know always, when it comes to reward, good versus bad, how much stronger is good versus bad?
Good trumps.
By how much? 500 times. What's the proof? Anyone remember?
2,000 versus 4.
Excellent, Nathan. 2,000 versus 4. It says by the reward that you get Hashem pays back for 2,000 up till 2,000, right? And when it comes to punishment, Hashem punishes until the third al shileshim va'al ribeim for 4. What's 2,000 divided by 4? 500 times. That means at least 500 times. Not at least 500 times is midah tova stronger than midah ra'ah. So maybe the reason why Abraham's words came true was because they were for the positive. We will return. But maybe for the negative, it doesn't work that way. So how are you bringing this as a proof that Pinchas should not have said this to Shemuel? Good question. That's Tosafot's question. Should have brought it from another place. Should have brought it from Ula, that Ula says, Le'olama yiftach adam pi l'satan, don't open your mouth to the Satan, Shne'emar shim'u divar Hashem, kitzine Sedom. Hear the words of Hashem, O mighty rulers of Sodom. So you see over there, that was for a negative thing, and it came true.
Saying that Abraham wasn't approved because he brought him back?
I'm asking, not Tosafot's question. Tosafot's asking, why is this a proof? It's for the positive. Maybe for the negative, it doesn't work as well. Maybe for the negative, Hashem doesn't listen. Because Hashem always gives the midah of Tov much more than the midah of Ra. 500 times. However, when it comes to this Gemara without Tosafot, I have a different question. Forget the good, bad. In this case, Yitzchak was not supposed to die. Watch this. Let me show you. Brit kiruta l'svatayim. I will wear a white shirt. Ha! Ha! Holy cow! Brit kiruta l'svatayim. I was already wearing a white shirt. Yitzchak was already coming back. It's very hard example to understand.
Coming back, he didn't come back. You're wearing a white shirt.
He did come back.
Yitzchak doesn't know where
This
they were
is
going.
not on the way back.
Yitzchak doesn't know until a certain point, and then he does
At the
know.
point where he's saying v'nashuva.
But that's irrelevant.
Because it's just not a good proof to what Pinchas and Shmuel is.
That's my point.
I got it.
Yeah, it's not a good proof. Because maybe Avram doesn't know. Maybe Yitzchak doesn't know. Maybe for them it's a good proof. But me and you, we know it's not a good proof. The whole thing was a test. He was never supposed to slaughter Yitzchak on the Akedah. Okay. Says the Gemara. Savur mineh diyad in diregelo. The Gemara says, end of the day, after this altercation, Shmuel held that a mourner, an avel, is allowed to cut his nails because we held like Rav Yossi, because you go always for the lenient when it comes to avelut. Savur mineh, first they thought that, what did he mean? He meant the fingernails of the hand, but not the fingernails of the foot. Diyad in diregelo. Amar Rav Anan bar Tachlifa. Rav Anan, the son of Tachlifa, said, Lididi mefarsha lamine de Shmuel. I learned specifically, Shmuel, I sat in his class and I heard the words come out of his mouth, Lo shna diyad v'lo shna deregel, that there's no difference, hand and foot. So therefore Shmuel holds, and he ruled that it was mutar on the hand and on the foot. Why would I have thought that the foot should not be allowed? Because you cut your fingernails on your hand more often than you cut your fingernails on your feet. So therefore, a mourner who has another 6-7 days, whatever, to not cut your toenails is not as bad of a deal, not as big of a deal. So therefore, we thought that you'd have to wait. The Gemara says, no, I heard specifically from Shmuel Rav Anan bar Tachlifa that he said it about the hand and the feet. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Rav Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rad, "Oh, begenustera asur." So he just dialed it all the way down. It's true you're allowed to cut them, but you're not allowed to cut them with scissors. Okay? Now, if you're not allowed to cut them with scissors, what does it mean?
Bite them.
Like biting.
Yeah, you're going to bite your toenails off, right? I mean, it needs a lot of yoga for that. All right. So
This is the shinui method.
exactly. So we're still using. Rav held that we're only doing this with the shinui. But if you're going to use what's it called? If you're going to use an instrument, an implement that's normally used to cut nails, that would not be allowed. That's what Rav says. Okay. Amar Rav Shemen Baraba. Rav Shemen Baraba said, one time, I was standing next to Rabbi Yochanan in the Bet Midrash on Chol HaMoed. He cut off his nails, he bit his nails off, and v'zarkinu, and he threw his nails on the side. Shma mina tlat.
I thought you're not allowed to throw
What
nails
do you
on
mean
the
by
ground
say shinui
because
method?
of a pregnant woman.
1 second. What?
Method. What do you mean by that?
Shinui means that you're not using a regular nail clipper. That's the normal method. We're going to allow you to do it, but we want you to do it in a shinui way, like in an unusual manner. So in other words, don't use a thing, use something else. Now, by the way, there's a machloket exactly what this ginustera is. One opinion says it means scissors. One opinion says it means a nail clipper. If it means a nail clipper, then scissors might be mutar. Because a nail clipper is like the most appropriate. I'm a man. I never cut my nails with a scissor, right? I cut my nails with a nail clipper. Women are always using 65,000 different things to cut their nails. Okay, so for women, the derech is much wider, I would imagine.
Scissors is shinui.
For me, I would imagine scissors is shinui. Okay? Huh? I know, I told them, 1 second. Says the Gemara, Shema mina telat. We learned from here, from this observation of Rabbi Yochanan, biting off his nails and casting them in the Bet Midrash, we learned 3 things. Shema mina mutar litot tziponaim chol HaMoed. We learned that you're allowed to cut your nails on Chol HaMoed. Vishma mina, we learned from here, ein behem mishum mius. We learned that it's not a disgusting thing in the eyes of halakha. It's not a disgusting thing to cut your nails, or even maybe to bite your nails even. Vishma mina mutar lezorkan. And we also learned that you're allowed to throw the nails and you don't have to flush them down the toilet or throw them in the garbage. Says the Gemara, Any, really? That's true? V'atanya, didn't we learn? Shiloshat devarim ne'emru b'tzipornaim. 3 things were said with regards to tzipornaim, to nails. Hakovran, sadik, if you buried them, sadik. Sorfan, you burnt them, chasid. Zorkan, you threw them out, rasha. So the best is tzadik, kovran, you bury them. You didn't bury them, you burn them, you're a pyromaniac, but you're pious. Zorkan, if you threw them out, Rasha, right? Taimamai, Esigmara, why? Why am I a Rasha? I threw my nails on my Rasha. Taimamai, Shema Tavor Lem Isha Ubara, Betapil. Maybe a woman who's pregnant will come along and she'll step on the nails, and they could cause, unfortunately, stepping on the nails could cause a miscarriage. Says the Gemara, Isha Be Midrasha Lo Shchicha. In the men's section of the Bet Midrash, the women were not there. So therefore, it was not a problem for Rabbi Yochanan to throw his nails in that place. Just I want to bring you out one other thing. I said earlier that we learned 3 things. Number 1, that you're allowed to cut your nails chol HaMoed. The second one is that it's not ma'us, it's not repulsive. What does that mean? Is that halachically repulsive? What does that mean? There's halachot about repulsive? The answer is yes. There's something called bal tishaketzu. Bal tishaketzu means, it has different interpretations. One opinion of bal tishaketzu is that you can't hold it. If you really need to go to the bathroom, you're not allowed to hold it in. But another part of bal tishaketzu is, if you're doing something that grosses someone else out, that's called bal tishaketzu. Don't make someone else grossed out, so to speak, okay? So the Gemara is telling you that it's not ma'us, that's the halacha of ma'us, whether or not something is considered that way. Says the Gemara, one second. Zimnin dimikanchilu v'shadilu avrai. What do you mean? Sometimes they're going to sweep the floor of the Bet Midrash, and then from the place that you threw them, they're now going to go to another place outside the Bet Midrash, and then maybe the lady will step on them. Kivan ishtani, says the Gemara, once they moved from where they fell, that no longer has the negative effect. So by the way, I don't know if you've ever cut your nails. I always cut my nails into the toilet, right? That's what I always do since I'm a kid, or into the sink, so you can wash them down the sink. Every once in a while, you have a rogue nail, goes off the derech, right? Can't find it. If you live in Israel, you have those balatot, forget about it. So you know what you do? Just go like this. Number one, a lot of times it moves and you'll see it. Location. It's like you're pinging its location. Okay. What happens if it moves? And if you didn't see it move, if you blew on the ground and it will move it anyway, even if you don't see it, at the very least, it's changed its location. Says the Gemara. What? Says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav. Zug ba mechamatan lefnei Rabbi. One time you had two Torah people, they came in front of the rabbi. Says the Gemara, they came from a certain place called Chamtan. The Gemara says, Umazutra, and Mazutra taught in a Braita, Zug ba mechamtan lefnei Rabbi. He said that it wasn't that he was saying from Yehuda in the name of Rav. Actually, the origin source for this story is from a Braita. A couple of rabbis came, Chamtan lefnei Rabbi. Ubikshu imenu tziparnaim, and they asked, what's the halacha? They didn't ask for his nails. They asked him, what's the halacha? Are you allowed to cut your nails? V'tir lahem, and he said it's mutar. V'im bikshu mimenu safa, hitir lahem. And it was clear, right, when he was posek, that if they would have also asked him about cutting your mustache, right, above the lip, right, this part over here, then that would also be mutar. Shmuel amar af bikshu menu safa v'yitir lahem. But Shmuel says no. It wasn't that it was clear from his answer. Like imagine the answer was, are you allowed to cut your nails? And then he would say, for sure, cutting your nails, trimming your mustache, mutar. They didn't ask him, but he answered. It was clear from his answer. Shmuel says no. They asked him both questions, and he answered both, and he allowed them both. Gemara says, Amar Abitul Safra Mishmei Derava. Abitul Safra, maybe he's related to Edmund, said, Mishmei Derava, the name of Rava, Safa mizavit lezavit. When a person has a mustache, we mean from one corner to the other corner. We don't mean the whole mustache. We mean the part of the mustache at the bottom. Amar Rabbi Amir, Rabbi said, what are we talking about? The lip that's getting in the way. So the guy is sitting there, he's eating, his mustache is over here, so misafa de safa. It doesn't mean that he's allowed to trim his mustache up here, because that's not getting in the way of anything, right? But cutting the mustache where it's bothering you from eating food, it's getting in the way, that is mutar. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman Yitzchak. Rav Nachman said, Lididi safa ki safa me'akev dami. He said, no, it bothers me so much, gets in the way so much, that any hair above my lip is already considered to me as if it gets in the way of my food. Okay. Now the question is, do we mean that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was an istanis? Istanis means a person who's very sensitive to anything, and that's what he was saying. Or do we mean no? He means ledidi kisafa me'akev dami. What he meant was that he ate in a certain way where his mustache. I'll give you an example. If you're eating an apple and you eat it like this, the mustache doesn't get in the way. If you're eating soup, it gets in your mustache. If you're drinking water, right? We all knew for that. It gets in your mustache. Milk gets in your mustache. So Rav Nachman was saying, for me, since there's some types of food that get in your mustache, I imagine there's two opinions, two ways to see it, to understand what Rav Nachman is saying. Now, the next part over here is going to be move on. We'll pick up Be'ezrat Hashem next time.
Sunday, you're good.
Sunday, what Sunday?